What is the best film ever made? If you are going to watch it, or watch it again, one thing to take notice of, the camera position through the 3 acts of the movie. For the first act the camera is positioned higher than the actors, giving the viewer the impression that they are above them. For the second act it is on the same level as the actors, making you part of the debate on whether or not the kid is guilty. For the last act the camera is below them, so you're looking up as they sit and pass judgment. I instantly thought of this after reading the top comment. The acting and the dialogue in that movie is so good. What they're talking about is despicable. Fantastic film. I think it was made for HBO in 2001, starring Kenneth Branagh, Stanley Tucci, and Colin Firth, but that was based on a West German film, The Wannsee Conference, a 1984 made-for-TV movie that was on YouTube last time I looked. I was a jury foreman once. I would say the experience pretty much met my expectations pretty closely. My case was interesting enough, maybe not all of them are, but for me it was a positive thing. I'd do it again. My main piece of advice to the defendant would have been, if you had wanted to be found innocent, you shouldn't have made yourself so blatantly obviously guilty. Casablanca, at first I was like, dude, this is just another old-timey romantic movie, but then it got real mature, like, a man, choosing either the love of his life or the future of a country he doesn't belong to, and in the end he does the manliest thing ever, he takes a stance against Nazis. Fellow Redditors, if you've seen Casablanca only once then see it again. The first viewing it doesn't quite sink in, for instance watching a Nazi officer read off an intelligence dossier on someone's life and having the balls to read over the Nazi's shoulder and answer, "Are my eyes really brown?" I just had my students watch this in summer school, world history. I have seen it probably 20 times but had to write a study guide with questions, so spent probably 4 hours this weekend rewinding and catching every single detail and plot point. It gets better and better every time. Perfect movie. The thing that really gets me is they made it in 42. They all had no idea how the war would turn out. Gives me chills. My mom is an old movie fiend, and one night when I was in 6th grade was watching The African Queen and I sat down and watched it with her. I really enjoyed it, and then she said that The Maltese Falcon would be on in a couple nights and I should watch that one too. Finally, we stopped at Blockbuster one Friday night and I rented Casablanca. From then on it's one of my all-time favorite movies. So many classic lines and an even better story. Casablanca is, rightly, untouchable. If anyone ever tries to remake this film, the spirits of Hollywood past will rise as one to smite them. I'm old enough to remember the brouhaha when Ted Turner colorized it. It was a complete mess. The cinematography works in black and white because it was meant to. Colorizing it ruins so many scenes. You don't feel like you're in construction. Oh, I'm a union delegate. Take my wife please. I take my wife everywhere but she always finds her way home. Badumtis. I asked my wife where you want to go for our anniversary. She says take me somewhere I've never been. I told her try the kitchen over there. Badumtis. Goodfellas is the film that if it's on TV I'll watch it to the end. It's so good every time at making the gangster life seem great and then totally undermining it and showing them for the scumbags they were. Perfectly paced, great acting, brilliant narrative. Now go get your shine box. I personally love Oh Brother Where Art Thou to death, but I think the best film would have to be another Coen Brothers film, Fargo. Also Lord of the Rings. It can't be overstated how great that trilogy is. I believe that movie's a classic simply because it manages to be clever, funny, and instill a sense of wonder in the audience, while still being pretty fucking terrifying. Like, the more lighthearted moments in the first half with Grant interacting with the kids, and Hammond with his optimism are perfectly challenged later when there's real danger. Great writing. The spiel by Grant at the start to the snotty kid about raptors eating him alive sent chills down my spine as a kid. The special effects are, maybe you'll be shot by a film buff for this, almost timeless. Like watching that now and it still stands up to modern CGI for me. This is largely because the SFX team on that film were savvy enough to know what CGI could and couldn't do. The time CG is used in that film is, mostly, distant, or dark shots often obscured somehow, be it rain or just being in a darker environment, with very simple single-point lighting, in other words the best possible situation to hide the limitations of the medium. Probably the worst CG shot in the film, or the one that's aged most noticeably, is the opening shot when they arrive at Jurassic Park of the Brachiosaurus feeding from that tree. Why? Because it's slow, gives us a really decent look at the dinosaur, and is in full sunlight. It's the shot that lets us study the details the most. All the close-up shots of dinosaurs, the raptors walking, the dinosaur heads close up, whether that be the Brachiosaurus in the tree when the kids and Grant have escaped the car, The raptor close-ups, the kitchen window for example, or the T-Rex glaring into the car, with the pupil dilating, or shoving its head through the roof of the Explorer, all of those are physical models. The raptors walking up and down the aisles in the commercial kitchen were dudes in suits. CG, honestly, was used pretty sparingly. That's why it still looks very good now, and movies a lot newer which were a lot more reliant on CG, look so much worse. The other reason it looks so good is that the CG is of actual physical models in most cases. Another reason why the Brachiosaurus looks so bad is that only the head had a physical puppet. The rest was pure invention. Meanwhile the T-Rex had a scan of the actual texture of a whole animatronic T-Rex. Though I still love that the SFX guy's little conversation made it into the movie. And it's not nearly as dark and bleak as the book. I'm not one of those Tihibo okay as be at terror gatekeeping types, but they mostly did right by the original story and kept enough of it in the movie. I love both equally for what they are. The book is dark and gloomy, the philosophy and math/data are a much more pronounced part of the storyline, and does not have a particularly happy/positive ending. All that is to say, I love how the movie emphasized the visuals of the gigantic dinosaurs and it's still just fucking thrilling to watch. That movie would never have worked if they simply shot the book's storyline and plot. It would have been a prehistoric themed sci-fi snuff film. Came in here looking for this. Love it so much I got the OG JP pinball from the 90s. I honestly don't think I could ever get tired of the movie. Right up there with it is Terminator 2 and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Holy shit, Terminator 2 and Who Framed Roger Rabbit are 2/3 of my holy cinematic trinity. Awesome to see them referenced in the same sentence by someone else. And to be fair, even though it's one of my favorite books, I've read it 3 times and I almost never reread books. It does drag for about 100 or 150 pages in the middle. That drag was all cut out of the movie. But outside of that, boy does that book know how to build suspense. I always was reading a couple extra pages every night after I would normally stop. Do yourself a favor and watch the first one first, unless you plan on skipping it. Terminator is classic Arnold, had era special effects, and doesn't take itself too seriously. T2 has much higher production and drama. After watching it, your expectations will probably be too high to really enjoy the first film. There is no one best in my book, but if I had to pick one near the top it would be Aliens, strictly based on how often I've viewed it. Others, but by no means all inclusive. The Hunt for Red October, Poltergeist, the original, Hope and Glory, The Princess Bride, The Philadelphia Story, triple feature with Holiday and Bringing Up Baby, Groundhog Day, Jaws, All the President's Men, The Thing, 1982, Young Frankenstein, Fargo. Edit, formatting. I'm going to get hate but I think Beauty and the Beast from Disney, they really pioneered CGI and the beginnings of using new technology for animation. The songs were wonderful and memorable as well but I appreciate the art and the background scenery, it was stunning. You just don't see that anymore. I still get chills when the Beast is dying and the effects of the rain and smoke, it looked real and brought real emotion. Back when I was a kid, mid-90s, there was a sports card store in the Twin Cities called Schindler's. There were maybe half a dozen of them around. Growing up, I wanted to watch Schindler's List because I thought it was about baseball cards, but Dad would never let me. Good thing he didn't. I remember the first time I saw it, love the movie but I can only watch it once every 2 to 3 years. I don't mean to sound like an elitist prick when I express that I kind of wish it was required viewing. But I kind of wish it was required viewing. My dad used to say, anyone in Congress who wants to vote to go to war, should have to watch The Deer Hunter first. He'd explain, that's what war takes away from young men. Everything. It takes away everything. And that you'd have to understand that's what you were doing to your own men, sending them into war. And I mean, Band of Brothers is a very different experience, as you know. But, yeah. People should know about Easy Company, and what they went through, and what they did. Grandpa, were you a hero? No. But I served with heroes. I mean, the interviews with those guys are just absolutely priceless. It's my understanding that his family basically spent his entire childhood fleeing the firebombing of Japanese cities. Think of the scenes where all the citizens are so excited to see their massive battleships go to war, then only their most powerful vessel limps home with a few desperate survivors. Miyazaki added basically the entire war plot to the film version as a recounting of what his toddler years actually were, including those that only fight to try reduce overall harm done, still getting just as scarred and fucked up as anyone. The whole lingering transformation thing is basically 1-to-1 for PTSD. He took Diana Wynne Jones's love story and added one of the most poignant anti-war messages I've ever seen as a fucking backdrop, able to do so with such power because he's lived it. Chicken Run is unquestionably the best film ever made, and that's a hill I'm prepared to die on. Timelessly funny, brilliant performances from the voice actors, and the animation is absolutely flawless. Every joke still lands even 20 years later. And the soundtrack, my goodness. For a claymation film about chickens escaping from a farm, Harry Gregson Williams and John Powell had no need to pull out all the stops the way they did, but damn is the soundtrack just perfect. Have a listen to Building the Crate, it's an absolute banger and fits the scene so perfectly. These are the same two who gave us the soundtrack to Shrek, by the way. We do this occasionally. We've done LOTR, and did Star Wars 1-6 before Episode 7, and the Harry Potter series. Next on the list is the Daniel Craig James Bond films before the release of the next film. Always a good time. We try and theme food and drinks. For the Star Wars marathon, I cooked Anakin's burnt ends smoker.